Thank you everyone for joining our September edition of Unveiled Fireside Chat series, where we will talk about leading engineering with empathy. Before we get into that, a little bit about Unveiled. Unveiled Bridging the Gap to Sponsorship is a nonprofit organization on a mission to empower underrepresented groups to break the cycle of being over-mentored and under-sponsored, enabling equitable access to opportunities for career advancement. We are happy to host these Fireside Chat series, bringing robust and honest conversations like our all other offerings. Unveiled is a great organization successfully innovating in an area that remains a gap for underrepresented groups, and we are amplifying our impact. With that, I'm really happy to introduce our host and guest for this month's Fireside Chat, Leading Engineering with Empathy. Our host for today is Jennifer Faherty. She brings over 15 years of professional experience in the financial services industry as a CFP professional, mentor for women advisors, and currently as the head of coaching and principal at Modera Wealth. She combines her personal finance background with expertise in the science of well-being, holding a certification in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania and a coaching certification through the International Coaching Federation. She's an active member of the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, the Women of Dartmouth NYC, and Chief, a professional network for women leaders, as well as the founder of Psych Candy, a platform providing tools and resources and services on the science of positive psychology and well-being toward helping people flourish in their professional and personal lives. Jennifer earned a BA from Dartmouth College and an MA from Columbia University Teachers College. And our guest for today is Chhama Jain. She is the Director of Engineering at Khoros, a leading SaaS platform for digital customer engagement. With over 15 years of software development experience, Chhama excels in building high-performing, inclusive teams across geographies. Known for her getting things done mindset, she has led strategic initiatives that have improved team productivity, enhanced retention, and reduced technical debt, all while fostering innovation. Chhama is committed to mentoring and supporting others in their career growth. Described as a preternaturally talented manager of people, she's passionate about creating collaborative and dynamic environments where teams thrive. With that, Jennifer, I'll hand it over to you to kick off the conversation.
Thank you so much, Sahana. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Chhama, for joining us today. Being a part of Unveiled, we both are part of this community. It's so important, as Sahana mentioned, this whole idea of, certainly mentorship is important, but really sponsorship and the critical role that plays in really creating an equitable environment. I know we both are so passionate about this mission. So I guess let's start off with, I'd just love to hear about kind of your background and how you got involved and what resonates with you about Unveiled and what we're trying to accomplish here.
Sure. I'm passionate about mentoring and coaching people. How I connected with Unveiled is an interesting story. Sejal Amin, who is one of the advisor on the board of Unveiled, was our CTO, and she's a phenomenal leader. Yes. And when I saw her promoting Unveiled, I'm like, I definitely have to be part of that first cohort. And I jumped onto the flagship, and I'm like, yeah, I want to be part of this, and I want to learn. And joining Unveiled was, I would say, that was my first stepping stone on shaping my career focus. I just did not learn the importance of sponsorship and mentorship, but I also learned how do I want to take my career from point A to point B, right? Like asking that question daily from myself. And why does that matter to me? Like, why does that point B matter to me, right? Like, why do I want to go there? Having those conversations daily, talking to diverse cohort group, talking to different mentors, which were coming from different backgrounds and learning from their real life experiences really shaped where I want to be and how do I want to move further in my career. It also enlighten a part of me where it was like, yes, mentorship and sponsorship is important, not to me, but I also should be part of giving that sponsorship and mentorship to my fellow co-workers or my reportees who are looking for that mentorship from their seniors. And I started jumping into that boat, talking to people, making sure that they are getting what they really need in their career growth, and making sure I can be a sponsor or a mentor for them whenever possible.
That's great. And today's topic is specifically on leading with empathy in engineering. But before we get into that specific topic of empathy, I just want to touch on some of the things you already mentioned. You mentioned so many things in just that little nugget, right? So you mentioned both mentorship and sponsorship and the importance of that as a receiver of those. And then
Yeah.
also in your involvement, it sounds like you from that were able to just have conversations with through your conversations, you start asking yourself and reflecting on your own career and kind of where you want to go. You said point A to point B. But I love what you said at the end about it's not only being the receiver of sponsorship, but also in mentorship, but how you also then create that circle back and across, right, throughout the organization. If you could just kind of elaborate on that point about how you're giving back and how you're leading in that way.
Yeah, sure. Before that, I will touch base on what empathy means to me, right? I mean, for me, it's more the ability to understand and connect with the people, their experiences, their emotions, and their perspectives. It's not just like, even if they differ from my own, I mean, I just need to be able to tune in into their experiences and see how they're feeling, be in their shoes, acknowledging that, yes, everyone has different emotions and they take things in a different perspective. So, for me as an engineering leader, it was very important to understand everyone's perspective. How this feeling began in me is an interesting story. So how do I mean, I was promoted to a senior manager in my career, and how that happened was one of the director in Bangalore actually resigned, and I was given the opportunity to lead the team. Now, one of the biggest challenge for me was leading a remote team.
Mm.
And of course, people from a different culture. Being born and brought up in India, I was definitely coming from that background and culture. So I knew a little bit about how to embrace those people and how to talk to them. But it was definitely, I have not worked there for 10 years, and this was definitely a different pivot point for me. So, what I learned, I started talking to people. I tried to understand where they're coming from, what their main concerns are, and how can I solve this problem for them. Their main concern was having a leader in a different part of the world, right? How do they get the spotlight in the organization? How do they get in front of the organization with a leader who is just not sitting with them and who is like 12 hours away from them? So they were also concerned about, are we going to be biased about what work is given to the Bangalore teams, remote teams, versus the teams that are present in front of the leaders, right? So there were a lot of concerns around how can I put them in the forefront in the senior leadership versus giving them the leftover or technical debt kind of work. So I understood that, yeah, that is a different perspective. Like people in US culture do not worry about that stuff because, of course, they're talking to leaders every day. That was one of the pivot point for me. Okay, I need to be very empathetic with these people, understand their experiences, their frustrations, maybe their feelings on what they're working on, how they're working on, what kind of project they want to move on, giving them an environment to be very open and honest so that they can trust me in the process and they can be open and honest about any feedback, whether it's feedback about the organization, whether it's feedback about how I am managing things, whether it's me giving them constructive feedback, right? So it was important to have that two-way feedback loop. So I think having that empathetic conversations with them really led me to foster that environment where the people were honest with me and I was able to give them the right guidance and also give them the right kind of work that they were looking for. That is how the empathy began in my leadership.
That's great. And you were in a role that was remote and kind of presented certain challenges where you realized that you really needed empathy. And I loved how you defined that too. But you realized that you needed that empathy in order to kind of uplift your team, right?
Yep.
That's kind of how it first came out. I'm curious, did that come naturally to you, or once you realized that you had to do that, how did you develop that within yourself and also within your teammates?
So, I mean, some part of it is definitely natural, but right, when you are a leader, sometimes you don't understand. Like everyone has their blind spots. And I definitely had my blind spots. Like I used to assume things, but then when I started talking to a different part of the world or a different team altogether, and when I started having these skips where I'm not just talking to my direct managers who are reporting into me, but I'm also talking to people how they're facing their day-to-day life. And then it was like, oh yeah, I never thought about this idea, or I never thought about this perspective, right? It was more about learning and evolving from those conversations. For example, some of the things that I did was embrace the culture for sure. Like there's a big cultural difference between
Mm.
how US teams work and remote teams work. It could be like I have remote teams in Argentina, I have remote teams in Bangalore. So the culture definitely is a wide part of how teams operate. So embracing that culture, embracing that difference definitely helped me grow as a leader and earn the trust of the people. Making sure that we are celebrating festivals, or even if it's remote, just talking about it, just wishing them on their festivals, like makes a huge difference. Oh, my leader recognizes or acknowledges my celebrations and my festivals and my wins, right? Having that small conversations is a big part. Second, definitely is being inclusive. I mean, one of the smallest example of being inclusive I can tell you is being flexible in the timing. Now, when you have remote teams and when you have split teams who have people both from one part of the world and the second part of the world, you need to be cognizant about the timing. So, like, rotate your meeting times. You cannot have just meetings at night time for one part of the world always. Like, why should one part of the world suffer, right? So being cognizant of that very small fact that, hey, rotate your meeting times every week or every month, whatever the cadence works, is gives them the acknowledgement that yes, my leader is recognizing that I'm part of this team and I cannot give up all my nights to do the work, right? I have some of the part has to come from the other side of the world as well. Involve creating that relationship building, right? If you cannot have in-person meetings but having office hours where we just not talk about work, just have casual conversations, or just grab a coffee or a wine and just sit together and talk, like it could be anything. Have donut pairings, like we used to use that in Slack. Like introduce themselves, grow your network. So I think embracing those smaller things in your day-to-day life really helped me grow as a leader and evolve, like measure things, how things are going, talk to people, get feedback, and evolve. Like so, figure out what is working and what is not working. So that definitely helped me grow as an empathetic leader.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned those examples, because sometimes I think when we talk about something as big as empathy, right? It can be almost abstract or almost considered a soft skill that, of course, oh, yeah, my conversations, I'm empathetic. But you really mentioned a very specific things that you can do day to day, right? That really touch on the foundation of DE and I, right? And I love the example of the inclusive, just the time of when you meet, which seems so
And I'm
simple.
telling you, it is very important. Like it is very simple and it is really important because I felt the burnout of my nightly meetings when I took over this role, because it was hard for me to have engineers meet me during my daytime. I was like, okay, I would rather meet during my nighttime and save their nighttime. I had that mindset and I burnt out myself because it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting meeting everyone during your nighttime when you are supposed to go to the bed. It's your rest time, but you're meeting them. So I'm telling you, like from personal experience, it was very emotionally and mentally exhausting for me. I felt burnt out and I'm like, no, I cannot sustain this forever. And none of my team members can sustain this forever. It's very small thing, but very powerful thing that you can do on your teams.
And even the one you mentioned too about just asking them about their day, that's separate, just or having separate meetings, I would say, that are not work related, just to kind of build relationship, build trust,
Yeah,
is a way
yeah,
to express the empathy.
yes. Yes.
Anything else that comes to mind of other small things or larger, maybe even institutional things?
Culture is one part of it, meeting cadence is one part of it, but also like how you communicate. We are like 12 hours away and people cannot wait for 12 hours to come back and ask questions, right? So you have to figure out how to make sure that things are clear. Very simple example that I did was like when we do our technical development, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept of agile, but we do sprints, right? And we have sprints, which is mostly like 2 weeks worth of work, and we try to close things almost every day. So we have something called done, definition of done. Like, what does it mean to get something done? We had written criteria. So I'm like, write it down so that it is consistent across the organization, across my teams. If one team has a definition of done, it should be something similar for the other team as well. It should not be different. So, for example, if something is done means I have all the test cases covered. It has gone through the UX review. It has been tested. If it needs A/B testing, it has gone through A/B testing. Like there were certain criteria, right? It should be consistent across all the teams. So having remote teams definitely emphasizes that point for you where write things down if you want those to be consistent across your team so that people can follow those. Make use of technology, like use try to identify asynchronous tools. It could be Slack, it could be documents, it could be whatever document repository you're using. We use Confluence. So make sure that you are communicating via offline tools as much as possible. I mean, in-person conversations are always the best, but time is also of value over here. So make sure that you are instructing the teams to follow those asynchronous tools as much as possible. I mean, lastly but not the least, I mean, there should be a clear vision and communication from the leader on where we are headed. Like, how can people connect their day-to-day life to the bigger organization goal? And if people don't connect to that goal, I mean, they're in a lost world. Every developer or every person's day-to-day life connects to the larger vision, where we are headed, how my work is contributing to a value, a business value. And does this make sense for me or not? Like, am I part of this vision or not?
There's small things, but you're really going into also institutionalizing some of the empathy and the habits, right? Because you could say that some of these things were that you did as a manager, as an individual manager, but then how do you translate that into across other teams, other managers? So some of the examples you gave around process and the writing down the notes and the done method is all of
Yeah,
that
yeah.
really makes it part of then the culture or the organization. But I definitely want to touch on this idea of connecting their work to the larger organization, which really relates to positive psychology because you're creating meaning, right? That whole idea of you want to feel like you have a purpose, that you're part of the purpose. So if you could elaborate just a little bit more on that and really getting into more the how you did it.
Yeah, definitely. So as I said in the beginning, like I talk to a lot of people. I try to make sure that I'm approachable and I am listening. I'm actively listening to them, making sure that I'm understanding their concerns and I am providing them the right guidance helps build that trust where they're open and honest in front of me, as well as they're open and honest with their team as well. What does that do? That creates a positive environment where the team can flourish, they can collaborate really well, and they come up with solutions which, if an individual is working on this problem, they will not come with. Like if a group is working and collaborating together, you would be surprised how phenomenal they can get into the solutions and how fast things work versus when people are working individually. I am a person who definitely admits my own mistakes. So I'm one of the open, like, I am not shy of like, oh, I made a mistake and I will cover it up. No, I'm accountable. I will make sure that I admit my mistake and in front of my team. That gives them the confidence that, hey, my leader is not judging me for making mistakes. I can take this calculated risk and I can make a move forward. So that helps build that confidence in them that I can grow and take challenges and I can definitely make mistakes if I have to. So no one is judging me over there. The whole point of view, like leading with empathy has definitely ensured that I'm able to resolve conflicts through productive conversations, like giving constructive feedback. And especially in technology, you would see a lot that people come with a lot of analysis and technical arguments. And when it comes to empathy, it's more philosophical and it's more emotional based. So having understanding empathy helps me lead, like, okay, I can understand your technical acumen and technical arguments, but if you think about, you put yourself in another person's shoes and what they are saying, really helps me resolve conflicts when people are coming from a technical mindset, but I give them a different perspective on, let's look things from a different emotional angle if you have to. It helps me in the career growth as well, like when they're taking calculated risks, when they're moving forward, it helps me push them move forward, right? They're open and honest with me. They have an environment where they can flourish. They can talk to people without the fear of being judged. So they can make moves which helps them in their career moves. Talking to them helps me understand what their aspirations are, where they want to move, and how can I guide them in that process. So definitely helps me in moving, sponsoring them, mentoring them wherever possible through either like a structured emotional guidance, or it could be structured technical guidance, but it just helps me understand where they're headed, what they want, what they need.
Yeah, it's really the foundation of everything, right? Is empathy. You have to
Yeah, it
kind of
is.
there, right? Because you can't have the other things, as you said, uh, good, effective feedback. If you don't
Yes.
have that sort of empathy, you can't really active listen, really, or you're
Yeah.
active listening for empathy in many ways, right? Even the technical issues that you face in engineering, it sounds like they're separate, right? Technical and soft skills, but they're
Yeah. There's a very good example in my life that happened. I had a technical lead, very sharp person. He was one of the great designers we had, like an architect we had, but they were always focused on work, like, and how things are not working and how things are working. And they were very upfront in their feedback, which was good. I mean, I would like people to be very honest and transparent in their feedback, but I always feel that when there are junior engineers in your team who are still learning and struggling, there has to be a code of empathy around the feedback that you give them. So, and I saw that the junior engineers definitely weren't feeling comfortable approaching them or even opening up or their thought process. Like I could see that there was creating a tension between the team, and people were not speaking up. So I talked to my technical lead. I made them understand that, hey, I understand you're coming from a technical background and I totally resonate with what you're talking about. But when it comes to growing engineers, naturally, you have to have an empathy attached to the feedback. And I was surprised. Like, I mean, he welcomed the constructive feedback, like, but it was surprised for him, like, oh, I never thought about that. And I never had that perspective. So it was a very constructive talk with him where I made them understand that you need to wrap this up in a ball of empathy. You have to give them a chance to learn and grow. So next time when you talk to them, like, do the sandwich approach. That is the always I do. Tell them good things, then tell them the bad things, then wrap up with good things, right? Then people take the constructive feedback really well. So, and it made a drastic change in the team. People started feeling more comfortable talking about stuff. They started opening up themselves. Their code review, if you look at them, they were still harsh comments, but he was helping them out one on one, making sure they are understanding what that means, making sure people understand and grow and learn from the talks. Attaching empathy, even if it is coming from a technical or analytical background, really helps you grow the team, mentor the people, and just start from seeing things from their perspective, where they are lacking. How can I grow them? How can I make sure that they understand this world where I am standing?
really important because I think sometimes we get almost attached to our identities and we think that certain skills or our personality traits, but actually empathy and even emotional intelligence can be learned. These are not set in stone, a fixed mindset kind of thing. But I also thought that example was interesting too, because what can sometimes get in the way of developing empathy in another person, and also related. if any, are there situations where empathy maybe isn't something you want to exhibit?
There are definitely challenges. Going to the first question that you have, there are definitely challenges where empathy might not work, or why people are were like leaders specifically are worried of showing empathy. Um, I've seen that when it comes to leadership positions, it's identical to basically control, maintaining control. Like I have control over the situation, and when leaders admit that they're vulnerable, they're empathetic, they're sometimes seen as weak leaders. Like right, like especially in the engineering world where you have to make a lot of technical decisions and analytical stuff. When you attach empathy, you are perceived as a weak leader. And I think that is one of the reasons, one of the biggest challenge that you have in this world, where how can I make myself authoritative, but also be on the empathetic side, right? I do not want to be perceived as a weak leader because I do have the capability to make strong decisions. Most of the time, these leadership positions are related to emotional detachment. And that's where a leader comes in and says that I cannot be the person who is emotionally attached to the people. So that is one of the areas I think it's very hard and challenging. Also, I mean, it's a culture, right? Like how the culture of the company is. Do you embrace empathy as a culture in the company, in the organization? Or do you more focus on stern leaders or stoicism where they are just focused on the technical outcomes and not the well-being of the people, right? I think a lot of it drives from that cultural aspect of the company as well. Sometimes they are shy of showing that empathetic side to it just because of these cultural norms, or with the fear of being judged or being perceived as the weak leader. So that is definitely a few of the challenges. Going back to your second question about what are the scenarios where you probably do not want to show empathy or embrace empathy. I think there are many times in technical leadership specifically, because for example, when you have to make tough decisions, it could be a shift in strategy, and people are working on a project that was now supposed to be shut down, and if people care about that project, how do you communicate to them, right? Sometimes empathy can lead to cloud of judgment, and you will not be able to make the right decisions because that is the right outcome in those situations. Performance, one of those things. I think you should give enough time to people who are struggling and who are still learning. But I still believe that there should be zero tolerance for non-performance, right? Even if they're learning, they're putting their 100% or maybe 120% onto it. And if the people are not performing at all, there should be a threshold. People should be accountable for their work. These are very day-to-day examples that I've seen in my life where empathy might not work when leading an engineering team specifically.
Empathy is not necessarily a pass for bad behavior or bad performance.
Yeah, right.
It's also a reframe where empathy as a leader, you can be empathetic and will make you a better leader. It's not doesn't make you a weaker leader, but it's not always the side you want to emphasize all the time.
Correct.
For the sake of time, I want to just make sure you have a chance also, if there is anything we haven't touched on before we close today.
Great conversation and a really honest conversation, that while we all talk about the importance of empathy, there is still kind of the balancing of, which I feel potentially is something that women tend to face more, balancing between being perceived as a weak leader when they demonstrate empathy versus the inability to make strong decisions, right? So I think that it kind of having it just to kind of the arc of the conversation in terms of that showing up with empathy is more about how you're operating versus the what. I think that's a really powerful point. And these are the areas that we need to keep challenging the status quo. And I also loved your example of Chhama, of operationalizing empathy, right? Like that you heard your team's concerns and then you had a conversation with the team lead to really help them understand the team better. So again, that's also part of demonstrating leadership in how do you operationalize empathy. So thank you for sharing that as well. I'm conscious of time, so any final comments from both of you on really how to lead with empathy and fostering innovation?
I would just say that, I mean, empathy is one of the aspects, but I was talking to Jennifer the other day, but there are so many emotions that people have. And it's really important for a leader, engineering leader, to just acknowledge all the emotions, understand where people are coming from, be curious, talk to them, be in their shoes, understand their perspectives, and embrace the ideas, embrace the difference in the culture, embrace where people are coming from, and let them be open, let them be honest. I think, I mean, a lot of people do not get this, but leading with empathy definitely makes you a leader who can connect with people. And I have definitely felt it in my past 3 or 4 years working in this role. How can I lead with empathy? There are technical side of things which may or may not resonate with me, but there is definitely a people side which always resonates with me because I am putting myself in their shoes. I am learning from their perspective, things from their perspective, and I'm making sure I'm understanding things from their perspective and making a decision that I should probably be making. I have made mistakes. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm evolving every day, talking to people, having an open mind, just embracing things from different perspectives, not just from my own perspective, even if they differ. So that definitely makes a difference.
I just really want to thank you. I really appreciated first your just example of your story and your journey in your career, but also your very specific examples. I think there are takeaways that people can use for their teams as managers and leaders, where they can actually just implement from your daily tasks to, as Sahana reminded us, the operational pieces of it as well. And really just the idea that these are skills that you can learn if, in practice. It's something that is really, you want to embrace a growth mindset to it, because this type of leadership is most effective. That other kind of framework, kind of, you might say the more traditional one, kind of being the manager that kind of dictates, that doesn't work anymore. So really appreciate the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. It was nice chatting with you too. I love the discussion. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Show us some love. Like, subscribe, share, and tell us what questions do you want answered in a future episode.